Hey, Reverend Kim here from Marshfield United Methodist Church with Ted, who's one of my dogs. He doesn't show up on camera very often, but he will not leave me alone today. I wanted to talk to you briefly about fingernail polish. I don't know if you can tell, but I love fingernail polish. I change it all the time. I like to buy fancy fingernail polish and do my nails. And this week I showed up at church in the middle of the week wearing a new color. It's not what I have on my nails now, but it was called Velociraptor. And it was dark green and it had kind of red flakes and it was a matte finish. I thought it looked really cool online. I bought it. I wore it because I liked it. And while I was teaching chapel, this kid grabbed my hand, this little boy, and he was like, "Look at your nails." And all the little boys at the preschool got so excited about my nails. And I said, "You know what? Those are actually inspired by a dinosaur." And they thought it was really cool. So now, I'm going to have to make sure I always have polish on Wednesdays because they're going to look for it. We never know what other people are going to like. And that's a little bit of a challenge when you run a YouTube channel because we don't know what everybody likes. So I do want to tell you, that's sort of my weird intro to tell you, we're going to have a Bible study that we do in a very different way that will be simultaneously in person and live on YouTube. Nick has been asked to figure out all the tech part of that, but I'm going to revisit the study I wrote on Genesis that I did when I first came to the church. We had about 55 people in that class. Some of those people want to take it again. Some new people want to take it. You may want to take it, but we don't want to give you like a canned experience. We don't want to give you a talking head. We want to give you the live class experience. So we're going to be working out the tech in, and we hope that that's something you like. I hope this week's sermon and service is something you like. It generated a lot of discussion this week about who we are as a church and where we're going and how we welcome others. So welcome, welcome, welcome to the streams.
After 6 days, Jesus took Peter and James and John with him and led them up a high mountain where they were all alone. There he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, is it good for us to be here? Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say. They were so frightened. Then a cloud appeared and covered them, and a voice came from the cloud. "This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him." And suddenly, when they looked around, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. And as they were coming down the mountain, Jesus gave them orders not to tell anyone what they had seen until the Son of Man had arisen from the dead. They kept the matter to themselves, discussing what rising from the dead meant. This is the word of God for the people of God.
You guys have asked me when I'm going to run out of stories. Well, Tommy Owens asked me that. And I'm never going to write out of stories because you're writing them. And I'm taking notes. And I've had people ask me, I wonder what kind of stories you're going to tell about Marshfield when you're gone. I already tell Marshfield stories. When I get together with my clergy friends, they're like, "So, tell us about Marshfields." Now, I don't tell them your personal business. I don't tell them your last names or your social security numbers, anything like that. But I do tell stories about Marshfield that will be future sermons. And today, I've brought one back from the future. This is a sermon I will give at my next church whenever I go there, right? So I've already written it, all that stuff in the future, and now you get to see it today. So at one point in my career, I was sent to this church in a small town in southwest Missouri, and I asked someone on the district staff why they thought it was a good fit, me in this church, and she said, "Well, this church is known for kind of being a weird church, and you're known for kind of being a weird pastor." And she told me that the conference staff thought maybe this church and me together could be compatibly weird. So I went to the church. And in the first week, I met lots of people, very good people, very polite people, very formal people, very nice people, very calm people, very similar people, very related to each other people. And they just kept smiling at me and telling me to do my job however I wanted to do it, and they would adjust. So I called that district staff member back and I said, okay, the overall flavor of this town is vanilla. And you told me there would be some weird here. And so far, no weirdness at all. How am I supposed to pastor all these vanilla people? But then a lady named Vicky told me a story standing at the kitchen counter, and I thought, okay, so she's interesting. And then I met her husband, Johnny, that Sunday. He introduced himself and told me he probably wouldn't know me very well because he didn't plan to come to church very often. And I told him we'd see about that. And in that moment, we had each other's number, and I thought, okay, so there's an interesting couple. I put a loom in my office to see if it sparked any reactions in anyone, because looms are weird, and I'm weird about looms, and I thought at least someone would ask me why I had it or tell me to take it out of the office, but true to form, everyone just politely ignored it. Until a man named Jim stopped by my office, and he couldn't make eye contact with me because he was so captivated by the loom. So I taught weaving class, and pretty soon I was in a backseat of an SUV, driving down the back roads of Webster County, learning from the locals what it's like to live among the Amish with a group of people who were just discovering how interesting they each really were. Because the thing was, not only did I not see all the congregation's interesting angles, but they didn't see all of each other's interesting angles. They didn't know, for example, that one of them had training in cooking for large crowds on a shoestring budget, or that the man people thought had the most serious face in the world was the funniest man in the county. They didn't know that one couple spends a whole lot of their weekends going to contemporary Christian rock concerts, or that the really straight-laced managerial guy held family dance parties in his kitchen. Some of them knew some things about each other, and most of them only really knew well the people they knew outside of church. Now, some of that is because it's a small town in the Midwest, and we're pretty notorious for not wanting everybody to know who we really are. And some of it was because they had lost some members in recent years, and when you lose members like that, churches start to feel a sense of rejection, and when we feel rejected, we play it safe and pull back who we are. Honestly, some of it was because they had 3 separate smaller worship services. So they didn't even really know everyone who went to their church because they didn't see them, let alone know who they really were. And because 3 services had moved down to 1, almost everyone had had the experience of greeting someone they thought was new and discovering that that person had gone to church longer than they had. But they went to another service. Getting embarrassed like that, having those kinds of moments, led them to pull back even further into themselves. They kind of stopped greeting people they didn't know because they didn't know who those people were or how long they'd be around. So they struggled to identify and welcome in new people. So new people who came didn't have great experiences when they came. And over time, the church developed a reputation for being very proper and a little cool. I said to a friend at the time, a friend named John Dickey, that I had watched them for 6 months. I had seen their shared flavor, and I realized I would never, ever fit in with the church or with the town. And John wisely asked me, if I was sent to the town to fit in. Was that actually the point of being sent to the town? So I was there, being kind of weird, but not fully weird. And this guy named Kurt told me I needed to come out from behind the pulpit when I preached, which was, for me, terrifying. The pulpit was my shield. It wasn't that I thought the people would attack me, but it kept me at a distance. It kept me separate from them, which I knew I was in many, many ways. It was a physical boundary that represented more than just the wood between us. But I heard Kurt and I stepped out from behind the pulpit. When I stepped out in front of them, they stepped out in front of me. They started to reveal more and more interesting things about themselves. They started to share their real struggles, not just with me, but with each other, because we knew each other better. They recognized who was new and who they already knew, and they went and introduced themselves. And some of those people came back and started doing the same thing. We started to have these moments where you could really feel God's presence in the conversation, in the worship service, in the meeting. The church started to grow. The ship that had been slowly sinking into the waves turned around and rose back to the surface. And then somehow the engine came on and we started to move. Now, members of the church blamed me or credited me for that growth. But the growth wasn't because of me, and it wasn't about me. It was because of the church members' transfiguration. Jesus took a few of his friends up on a mountaintop, and on the mountaintop, everything changed for his friends. The clothes Jesus was wearing suddenly became a shade of white that is not of this earth. And they saw next to Jesus Moses, Israel's great leader, and Elijah, Israel's great prophet. And they wanted to set up tents for them. Let's all stay in this moment. This was a mountaintop moment. Something amazing was going on. Let's keep it going. And then a cloud descends and a voice says, "This is my son, whom I love." And then the voice commands, "Listen to him." When the cloud lifts, they're left with normal, everyday Jesus. But now they know, right, that Jesus is not normal or everyday. Jesus is even more interesting than they thought. Jesus has been revealed clearly as the second person of the Trinity. Jesus has talked about God as his Father. They know about the Spirit of God, and now they know Jesus is, for sure, the Son of God. They know now in this moment who he really is. His identity has been revealed through the transfiguration. But he tells them not to make a big deal about it with the others until he's risen from the dead, which he understands, but they don't understand because that hasn't happened yet. And instead of staying up on the mountaintop, they go on. They go on to ministry. They go on preaching. They go on healing. But those guys knew. They knew who he was as they were working with him. They saw God working in him. They had no doubt that God was working through him. Not anymore. And that's what happened in that church, in that small town in southwest Missouri. You know, there were lots of ways people understood why they grew. And sometimes I tried to tell them, but they had their own experience and analysis of that. But I've worked in a lot of churches, and I know what that was. It was transfiguration. They didn't change who they were, but they revealed who they were. And they revealed God in their lives, working through them. When people see a good-looking church where everybody's nice, polite, behaving, I kind of wonder where God is in that. Is God just blessing them in their goodness? Because sometimes the people that go to those churches and look great come and talk to me about their stuff, and I'm like, oh, maybe they're just required to wear masks, requiring each other to wear masks, more comfortable doing that. When people see a church full of people who have been transfigured, and you can tell who they really are, people can see God at work in them. You can see God at work in their lives. At this church I used to serve, we started to see God at work. We could see people hold on to their faith when times got tough for them. And we could see that because people shared when times were tough for them. And then people were also sharing about holding on to their faith. We saw healings and reconciliations we never imagined possible. We saw lives changed by Jesus Christ. We saw lives changed by people's participation in that church family. And I know you're thinking that the whole time I was there could not have been a mountaintop experience, and it wasn't. But Jesus and his friends didn't stay on the mountain. That's not where God's work gets done. That may be where God reveals God's self, but that's not where the work gets done. We had more than one person being transfigured. So it was like a continuous cycle of people being transfigured in our midst, stepping out and showing more of who they were and how God worked within them. And then the new people that we now greeted very well came for with almost instant transfiguration because we weren't walking around pretending to be who we weren't. So they didn't either. They could come in more as they were, and we could get to work together quicker. And you're probably wondering too, if there were downsides to people showing who they really were. I mean, not every side of a person is their good side. Am I right? And there's always a worry we have that if we show ourselves, then people will know who we really are and they'll see what's wrong with us. And you know that happened. That happens sometimes. It happens anytime someone is transfigured and shows their self, someone who is not Jesus Christ, who is the only perfect person. But dealing with that is part of being in community together, putting up with the fact that everybody is not as perfect as we are. And in Christian community, when people see other people's imperfections, when people get sideways with us, when we see small disagreements boil into larger issues, when we struggle with each other and who we are and how we act, we got through it by exercising grace, that undeserved forgiveness God offers us, that we understand as United Methodists, because it's one of our core concepts. We didn't always have perfect grace for each other, but we practice grace with each other. And that's what Jesus Christ taught us to do, to be forgiven and offer forgiveness, to receive grace and uh, that grace that lets us into the kingdom, and then to offer that kingdom style grace to the people we meet and the people we see for who they really are, warts and all. It was a practice. I know sometimes it's hard for you to have me as your pastor because you can tell that I left a big piece of my heart in Southwest Missouri, in a church full of transfigured people, in a little town that I'd only known previously as a stop for McDonald's. And you might think it's because I had so many mountaintop experiences with them, so many moments where I saw people become who they really were right in front of my eyes, people transfigured, revealing how much God loved them and worked in their lives. But actually, what I loved most about them was not the mountaintop moments we shared, but the moments we spent together in the trenches when we were doing the work of ministry side by side, studying together, worshiping together, learning together, meeting together, eating together, live nativitying together, strategizing together. And in those moments when we were working together for the kingdom, we could hold in our head the knowledge that we knew each other, that we chose each other, that we could see God working in each other's lives and wanted that for each other. We got it through our heads that we might disagree today, but we would work together tomorrow. I loved the grace we shared. Jesus Christ went on a mountaintop, revealed to his closest friends who he really was. And that moment got them through all the hard times that were coming for them, all the hard times in the trenches. And in that, he gives us a model for how we are to live in beloved community, how we are to have these mountaintop transfiguration moments and then come down together and do the work with grace. That's not just my hope for your church. That's my hope for every church in the world, that we will live in a continual process of transfiguration, that we will reveal God's work in our lives by being who we really are together, and that we will accept the grace God gives us for who we are and practice God's grace amongst ourselves, amongst our community, and transform the world. Amen.